Have you ever worked with someone who is, well, let's be honest, kind of a sleeping volcano?
Oh, I think we all know exactly the type of person you're talking about.
Right. Like, Monday through Wednesday, when the tasks are just mundane and routine, they are totally quiet.
Yeah, they're practically in standby mode.
Exactly. Just let power, saving the battery, maybe even a little checked out. They're definitely not the loudest person in the room. And you might even wonder if they're fully engaged with what's going on.
But then something shifts.
Yes. Thursday hits, the project is literally on fire, the client is screaming, the stakes go completely through the roof, and everyone else is panicking.
And suddenly, this person wakes up.
They wake up. And they don't just wake up, they turn into a completely different machine. They take over, they dominate the room, they fix the whole thing with this massive explosion of competence.
And then the very next day, they go right back to sleep.
It's the classic clutch player phenomenon. But today, we aren't just telling stories about these people. We are popping the hood to see exactly how they're wired.
Which is what we do best here.
Exactly. We are doing a deep dive into a really specific personality profile from the Max Energy ME80 personality system.
And for those of you who might be new to our deep dives, the ME80 system is really fascinating. It's not just your standard, are you introverted or extroverted test.
No, not all.
It maps human behavior based on energy mechanics. So how you process information, how you make decisions, and crucially, where you get your drive. It basically treats your personality like a computer operating system.
And the specific code we are cracking today is AWFU. And the report calls this profile the peak performer.
It's a really fitting name, actually. But I do think when people hear performer, they immediately think actor or showman.
Yeah, like someone on Broadway.
Right. But this is different. This is about performance in the sense of a high-end sports car hitting its max RPMs. It is entirely about output.
So our mission today is to decode this ME80 report. We need to figure out why they seem to need chaos to thrive, why the report says they have a high-energy performance style, and honestly, maybe most importantly, what happens to them when the show is over.
We're going to walk through this layer by layer.
From their core identity all the way down to their deepest cognitive programming. So let's get into it. Start us off with the hero section of the report. Every profile in the Max Energy system has a core declaration, right? Like a slogan that defines their whole existence. So what is the banner headline for the AWFU?
The report defines their core drive with this exact phrase. It says, using excitement to raise standards, pushing performance to personal peak ceiling again and again.
Personal peak ceiling. That is an incredibly intense phrase.
It really is.
Because it doesn't say meeting the goal or hitting the KPI. It literally says hitting the ceiling.
Right, which implies they aren't looking for a finish line that somebody else set for them. They are testing their own limits. They want to see exactly how high the dial goes before the machine breaks.
It's an internal competition.
Exactly. Even if it looks highly external to everyone else.
Yeah.
They're constantly asking themselves, can I top what I did last time?
But here is the catch, and the report is very specific about this. They don't just do this anywhere.
No.
They aren't peak performing while, doing the dishes or filing paperwork.
No, definitely not. The report actually says they enter this high output state specifically in fields that are watched, expected, and needed.
Watched, expected, and needed. That kind of sounds like they just need an audience. I mean, is this just narcissism? Do they just want attention?
I don't think it's vanity at all. I really think it's fuel. Think of it like a solar panel. A solar panel needs sunlight to generate power, right?
Sure.
For the peak performer, the sunlight is high stakes and external observation. If nobody is watching and nobody actually cares about the result, their internal engine simply doesn't turn over. They need the pressure to activate the mechanism.
That perfectly aligns with the section on their inner engine. It says they are extraordinarily attuned to the stage and competition. But it also says, once timing feels right, your inner engine instantly starts. That word timing really stands out to me.
It's a crucial word. It tells us a lot about their control mechanism. They aren't just frantic energy running in circles causing chaos.
They wait.
They wait. They watch. They have this really global view of the entire situation. And they're scanning for the exact moment where their intervention matters the absolute most. And when the timing aligns, meaning when the stakes are at their highest, they launch.
0 to 60 in a second.
Exactly.
And once they launch, the report says they concentrate their resources on key nodes. Can you translate that for us? What is a key node in this context?
Well, in any crisis or complex project, there are 100 different things you could be doing. But usually, there are only 2 or 3 things that actually determine who wins and who loses.
The critical path.
Right. Those are the key notes. This profile completely ignores the fluff and attacks those 2 or 3 points with what the report calls the most direct and forceful methods.
So they definitely aren't trying to be polite about it. They are coming in hot.
They are there to define winners. It is binary for them, win or lose. They use that excitement to cut through all the noise and just force a result.
Okay, I want to visualize this for everyone listening. The report provides this energy matrix radar chart. So if you're listening, just imagine a radar screen with spikes showing where this person's energy is strongest.
There are 3 main spikes we really need to look at here to understand how they operate.
The first one is pretty obvious based on everything we just said. Drive and expression are prominent.
Right. They have a very heavy foot on the gas pedal. They push forward. They express outwardly. They naturally take up space in the room.
But the second one is judgment, which is listed here as solid.
That is the stabilizer. Because if you have a Ferrari engine, that high drive, but you have no brakes and absolutely no steering, you're just a car crash waiting to happen. Solid judgment means they can actually handle that speed. They aren't reckless, they are aggressive. And there is a massive difference between those 2 things.
And here is the third spike, and this is the one that honestly kind of confuses me. The manifestation leans internal.
Yes, this is the great paradox of the AWFU peak performer.
Help me reconcile this. We literally just spent 5 minutes talking about them being on stage, being watched, being out there defining winners. How on earth can their manifestation, their processing be internal?
Okay, think of it like a deep-sea diver. The dive itself is this huge, dangerous, highly external event. But when they come back up to the surface, they have to sit in a decompression chamber.
Oh.
A decompression chamber is the internal manifestation. They perform for the crowd, but they process the reality of that performance inside their own head, and usually in total silence.
So the show is public, but the battery charging is strictly private.
Precisely. And that split is really what defines their entire psychology. They live in 2 completely different worlds, the stage and the cave.
That is a perfect segue into the deep structure section of the report. The ME80 system breaks down the human operating system into 4 distinct layers: IP, IQ, EQ, and manifestation. We need to go through these one by one to see how that engine is actually built.
Let's start at the very bottom, the foundation. The IP layer, or the inner value layer.
The report defines the IP layer here as direction sense initiates.
Direction sense. That is their internal GPS.
But it says it initiates. That means it comes first, before anything else.
Correct. Before the excitement, before the audience, before the giant explosion of energy, there has to be a vector. They have to know where they are going. A peak performer isn't chaotic energy. They're targeted energy. If they don't have a clear direction, they simply won't move.
So if you're a manager, you can't just yell at them to work harder. You actually have to point to a mountain and say, climb that.
Exactly. They need a target to lock onto. Without the target, the engine stays completely off.
Okay, moving up one level to the IQ layer. The report calls this the emotional activation layer. And for this profile, it's defined as risk and consequence judgment.
This connects directly back to that solid judgment spike we saw on the radar chart. This is their safety valve.
But how does that work in real time? If they are in the middle of this memorable eruption of performance, are they really stopping to think about risk?
It's happening entirely in the background, like a supercomputer running a diagnostic. While they're pushing incredibly hard, this layer is constantly scanning. It's asking, if I say this, do I get fired? If I push this hard, does the whole deal break?
So it keeps the direct and forceful method from becoming a, career-ending method.
It certainly tries to. It adds this really vital layer of cold calculation to the hot energy of the performance itself. It ensures that the peak is sustainable, not suicidal. It's always asking, is the win actually worth the cost?
Which brings us to the next layer up, the EQ, or decision calculation layer. Now, this is usually where logic sits in other profiles, but for the AWFU, the report says emotional expression and release.
This is such fascinating phrasing, because usually we think of decision-making as this quiet, logical, spreadsheet kind of process. But for the AWFU code, the decision is fundamentally tied to expression.
Wait, does that mean they literally scream to make a decision?
In a way, yes. Think about a professional tennis player grunting when they hit a massive serve, or a trial lawyer delivering a closing argument with incredible passion. The decision isn't a silent checkbox in their mind. They decide by doing, and by doing it expressively. They literally release energy to solidify the choice.
So if you tell a peak performer to calm down and think about it quietly, you might actually be breaking their cognitive process.
You're cutting the wire. They absolutely need the flow of expression to navigate the problem. If they
Mhm.
bottle it up, they can't calculate. They need to let the energy out to actually see the path forward.
That is a huge insight for anyone living or working with this type. Now, the final layer, the very top of the stack, the manifestation layer. The report says energy operates inward, carrying, absorbing, integrating.
And here we are, right back at the decompression chamber.
Carrying, absorbing, integrating, those are very heavy, almost passive words compared to the rest of the profile.
They are. And this is the absolute cost of doing business for them. After the expression and release, the energy totally reverses flow. It turns inward. They have to carry the weight of the result. They absorb the feedback. They integrate what just happened into their core identity.
It sounds kind of exhausting, honestly.
It is extremely exhausting. It's a mandatory recovery period. If they don't get this time to go internal, they burn out completely. They cannot be on 24/7. The system simply forbids it.
So the peak performer is basically a biological battery that discharges massive amounts of energy very rapidly and then needs to sit in a charging dock for a really long time.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's move to the deep analysis section. We know the mechanics now, the direction, the risk assessment, the expressive decision, the internal integration. But what are the personality traits that actually emerge from this? The report lists the core traits simply as peak output.
Which brings us back to that 80-20 rule. They don't just work hard. They work incredibly smartly on the very few things that actually matter. They concentrate everything on those key nodes. And when they're in that state, their output is just exponentially higher than the average person.
But every superpower has a shadow side. And the report identifies their shadow blind spot as peak dependency.
Dependency. That is the really dangerous word here.
What does that actually look like in the real world? Like an addiction to adrenaline?
Essentially, yes. If your entire identity is built on being the hero who saves the day when everyone is watching, who are you on a Tuesday afternoon when everything is totally fine?
You probably feel useless.
You feel completely invisible.
Yeah.
And that peak dependency can lead to some really bad behaviors. They might actually manufacture a crisis just so they can step in and solve it. Or they might crash into a pretty severe depression when things are calm, just because they aren't getting that dopamine hit of being needed and being watched.
It's like the rock star coming off a world tour. Normal life just feels like it's in black and white compared to the technicolor of the stage.
Exactly. Learning to manage that peak dependency, learning that you have profound value even when you aren't actively erupting, is the biggest growth challenge for this profile.
The report also touches on their social dynamics. It uses a term I really like: energy switching.
This perfectly explains the hot and cold behavior that their friends and family probably see all the time.
Right, like 1 minute they are the absolute life of the party, and the next they are just staring blankly at a wall.
And people take that so personally. They think, oh no, did I offend them? Why did they just shut down? But it's literally just the machine switching modes. They switch from expression, the EQ layer, to integration, the manifestation layer. They aren't ignoring you. They're just rebooting.
So if you want to be friends with an AWFU, you have to be okay with the silence.
You have to respect the recharge. If you poke them while they're integrating, always asking, what's wrong? Why are you being so quiet? You are just draining their battery even further.
Let's talk business. Why do you hire these people? The business values section has some incredibly evocative language. It says they open situations through key plays. And then, and this is my favorite line in the whole document, they complete high-efficiency, memorable eruptions for teams.
Memorable eruptions. It almost sounds like a natural disaster, but in business, it is absolute gold.
What is a memorable eruption in a normal corporate setting?
It's the kind of performance that becomes company lore. You know, like, remember when Sarah flew to Tokyo and rewrote the entire multi-million-dollar contract in one single night? It's an event. It fundamentally changes the landscape. It's not just a completed task. It's a definitive victory.
The report also says they are the ones who define winners.
That's huge, because in a highly competitive market, ambiguity is death. You need someone who can cut through all the fog and say, this is winning. That over there is losing. We are going there. They crystallize the goal for the entire team.
So where do we actually put them in an organization? The report has a list of recommended professional fields. Let's stress test these against what we've learned. First up is business performance. Pitches, roadshows, presentations.
It's a perfect fit. It's high stakes, there's immediate feedback, and a very clear winner and loser. It's a literal stage. It feeds that high drive and satisfies the need for expression.
Next up, critical external affairs, negotiations, and major partnerships.
Again, it hits the watched, expected, and needed criteria perfectly. You need that mix of solid judgment from their IQ layer to read the risk, like, can we push and ask for more money here? And the emotional expression from their EQ layer to push the deal across the line with total confidence.
The next one is competition execution, charging projects.
The word charging implies aggression. This isn't just maintenance mode. This is actively taking the hill. If you have a project that is completely stalled or failing, you drop a peak performer in to literally charge it back to life.
And finally, results-oriented roles, positions needing peak score support.
That sounds exactly like a closer role. You brought them in specifically to bump the numbers at the very end of the quarter. You absolutely do not waste them on the day-to-day grind. You put them right where the score is kept.
So, bringing this all together, what is the main takeaway for you listening right now? What is the golden rule for the AWFU?
I really think the conclusion in the report sums it up best. It says when results are clearly seen and publicly acknowledged, peak performers keep igniting engines.
It really all comes back to that acknowledgement, doesn't it? They need the scoreboard.
They absolutely do. They are catalysts. If you hide them in a windowless back office, you will kill the engine. But if you give them a stage, they will open situations and raise the standard for everyone else around them.
But the big caveat is you have to let them retreat.
You have to. Eruption and then integration. If you try to force them to erupt 247, or if you deny them the time to carry and absorb the experience internally, the machine just breaks.
It's a specific rhythm, high noise, and then deep silence.
That is the heartbeat of the AWFU code.
This has been such a cool look into a really high-octane personality. It really makes you appreciate that performance isn't just about, showing off. It's this highly sophisticated internal mechanism of risk assessment, emotional release, and deep psychological integration.
It's a very finely tuned system, provided you actually know how to operate it.
Now, for those of you listening who are thinking, wait, is this me? Or, oh my gosh, is this my boss? We should mention exactly where this comes from. This deep dive was based on the Max Energy ME80 personality assessment.
It's a really fascinating framework for understanding yourself and your team.
If you want to dig deeper, maybe find your own code, you can check out their official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
Definitely worth a look.
You can also search Facebook for the community groups. The search terms are Max Energy Shu, that's the Chinese term, or Metenergy Shu.
That's where you'll find all the discussion groups and a ton of more resources.
I want to leave you with a thought today. We talked a lot about that shadow trait, the peak dependency, the profound need for the applause.
The fear of the quiet.
Exactly. So my question to you, whether you are an AWFU peak performer or just someone who really loves the hustle, is this. If you are someone who only feels truly alive when the stakes are high and the crowd is watching, who are you in the quiet moments between the shows? When the lights go down and it's just you and the silence, is that enough?
That really is the ultimate question.
Something for you to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
See you next time.
Bye for now.